school's out, blame corona, but I still got some science I could show ya. No class, no school, that's cool, throw the class on the YouTube. Even if they shut the school down, I'll get that knowledge anyway somehow. Real scholars won't stop for corona. Tune in for that science takeover.
Happy Friday, everybody. It is Friday. Yay. Get your dance on. Because it's Friday. Get your dance on. Thank you for tuning in today. Shout out to all the HB Warriors. Just have a high five. Shout out to all of our subscribers and all of our visitors. We are here to learn about science from my house to your house. Let's get started. So yesterday and previous days, we were having a conversation about viruses. So we want to make sure that we tap back into that discussion in order to focus on today's lesson. We completed lesson 6 yesterday. And so now we're tapping into a section that's called Reading Further, all right? Attack of the viruses. So let's take a step back and make sure we understand how viruses work, what are viruses, before we get into that reading, okay? So right here on the screen, it shares that viruses are very tiny germs. They are made of genetic material inside of a protein coating. Viruses cause familiar infectious diseases such as the common cold, flu, and warts. They also cause severe illnesses such as HIV or AIDS, smallpox, and Ebola. Sure you've heard of those. All right. Now here's something we want to talk about. Viruses are like hijackers. What in the world is a hijacker? You've probably heard this term before. I want to go to Merriam-Webster just to pull up a definition for you. Okay. This is a definition. Let's take a look. To steal by stopping a vehicle on the highway. Okay. To stop and steal from a vehicle in transit. All right. So we go back to this discussion now that we know what a hijacker is. Okay. Viruses are like hijackers. How so? They invade living normal cells and use those cells to multiply and produce other viruses like themselves. This can kill, damage, or change the cells and make you sick. Different viruses attack certain cells in your body, such as your liver, respiratory system, or blood. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. All right? We want to take a look at a clip that I'm sure you've seen before. And this is from Madagascar, Escape to Africa, 2008. All right? And this is a clip of hijacking. Let's see what this looks like in this video and compare that to how a virus hijacks a host cell.
Stage 1, go.
Oh no! What have I done?
Come on, take the bait.
What happened?
What's going on?
Look at the poor little guy.
Is it dead?
Stage 2, go.
I will give him the kiss of life.
Oh, Rico. Reverse. Dance. Music.
No, stop! Come back! Oh.
All right, so now that we know how hijacking works, we can apply that concept to how viruses come into a host cell and hijack. They come to take over, all right, the environment, and whew, it's a bad look. All right. So when you get a virus, you may not always get sick from it. Your immune system may be able to fight it off. For most viral infections, Treatments can only help with symptoms while you wait for your immune system to fight off the virus. Our immune system does a big job for us. Antibiotics, and we talked about this yesterday, do not work for viral infections. There are antiviral medicines to treat some viral infections. So we want to keep that in mind, okay? We also talked about yesterday vaccination. Okay, periodically, doctors will call children in. You have like a visit when you're a certain age. Babies have certain visits at certain periods, certain months. And then when you turn 1, you have visits, 2, 3, 4, you keep going on in age. And different visits, they give you different vaccinations. And that's to help prevent someone from being able to get a particular viral infection. All right, so that's another strategy outside of antiviral medicines. Okay, so now that we have our flashback of viruses, let's talk about something related to world history. In 1918, just as World War I was coming to an end, another enemy suddenly attacked without choosing sides. Who could this be? In just 2 years, it infected more than 1/5 of the entire world's population and killed between 20 and 50 million people. In fact, it killed more people than the war did. What was this deadly new enemy? Why was its attack on humans so devastating? And as we're reading this information, I want you to think about our current situation with the coronavirus, all right? There was a pandemic that occurred before. Viral outbreaks. The new enemy was an unusually lethal virus. It caused a disease that at the time was called the Spanish flu, even though it may not have come from Spain. As soldiers traveled between North America, Europe, and Africa, the virus spread around the world. While most flu viruses known at that time attacked the very old and very young, the victims of the Spanish flu were healthy people between the ages of 20 and 40. Doctors didn't have any experience with the disease, and there were no effective drugs for treating patients who caught it. People were very frightened, and panic spread quickly. Without medicine to rely on, some turned to superstition. Some people ate sugar cubes that were soaked in kerosene. Others tied red ribbons around their right arms. Carrying a potato in your pocket was said to offer protection from catching the virus, as was eating raw onions. As the death toll rose, health officials finally began to take action. Communities enacted drastic laws that were designed to stop the spread of the disease. Schools were closed and public gatherings were canceled. In some places, people were required to show certificates of good health before they were allowed on trains and buses. Officials gave out face masks to be worn in public. Spitting in public and even handshakes became illegal in some cities. Wow. In the 1918 Spanish flu was a pandemic, a disease that occurs over a wide area and affects a lot of people. Like other viral outbreaks, it eventually died out, but not before it had claimed tens of millions of lives around the world. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a video that will describe what happened in 1918.
A new and unusually deadly influenza virus swept the globe in a pandemic that we are still studying today.
The 1918 pandemic caused the global deaths of probably 50 and maybe up to 100 million people, making it the worst natural disaster in all of recorded human history.
But what made the pandemic so lethal? NIAID's Dr. Jeffrey Taubenberger has been studying the 1918 flu for decades.
most people who had influenza in 1918 had a completely typical course of influenza, like you would see today. But in 1918, a really unusually high number of people ended up having very severe illness, meaning that they actually developed a pneumonia, an infection of their lungs, that started out as a viral pneumonia and then rapidly progressed in most cases to a secondary bacterial pneumonia. They had no way to treat the viral infection, they had no way to treat the secondary bacterial infections, so these people were just really left, in a sense, to suffer. And this process, from initial onset of infection to death by bacterial pneumonias, usually took around 10 or 11 days.
Ordinarily, influenza is most deadly in the very young and the very old. But as Dr. David Morans explains, the 1918 virus was unusual.
The two things that were different in 1918 is the deaths in all those age groups were more than they had been in other pandemics that we had seen, and that there was a very high rate of death in people between the ages of 20 and 40, which had never been seen before and which had never been seen since.
To find out why the virus was so lethal, Dr. Taubenberger and other scientists retrieved samples of lung tissue preserved in paraffin from soldiers that had died of the flu. Eventually, with the help of tissue recovered from frozen bodies in Alaska, Dr. Taubenberger's team was able to reconstruct the 1918 flu virus.
Unfortunately, when you look at the genome of the virus and just compare it on paper to other influenza viruses, nothing obvious really pops out at you as to why it would behave this way. And yet we know that this virus is a really virulent and pathogenic virus. And one of the things the 1918 virus did, it does in experimental animal models, and there's data to say that that's what happened in people, is that it induced a really strong and very unusual kind of inflammatory response. So that the body's response, immune response to the virus itself, contributed heavily to lung damage and pathology, and probably contributed to serious illness and death. So it's this very unusual inflammatory response that's one of the key active research focuses of my laboratory, to understand why the 1918 virus induced that, and what perhaps we could do in the future to try to develop drugs that might target or limit aspects of the inflammatory response as a way of treating severe viral infections.
All right, so that video gives us a visual of what was going on in 1918 with the Spanish flu, okay? Viruses still cause many diseases today. Some, like the common cold virus, cause minor illnesses. Others, such as measles, polio, hepatitis, AIDS, and Ebola, can cause serious diseases or even death. The Ebola virus is one of the deadliest viruses in the world because, unlike many other viruses, there's no vaccine for the Ebola virus. Ebola viruses have existed for some time in West African forests, where they infect monkeys, gorillas, and chimpanzees. Humans who come in contact with an infected animal or the virus can become ill. So small outbreaks of the disease have occasionally occurred. In 2014, though, a large Ebola outbreak raged through Western Africa. Many thousands of people became sick and died. But this time, scientists were more familiar with Ebola than they were with the Spanish flu virus in 1918. They knew that the disease was caused by a virus, and that it was spread through contact with body fluids such as blood, sweat, and feces. As a result, health workers used protective bodysuits and masks when handling the infected people. Patients were isolated quickly, and officials tried to prohibit people from traveling, especially by plane. Sounds familiar, right? About a year after the epidemic started, the number of new patients finally began to decrease, and the epidemic lessened. Although the virus was devastating to local populations, a larger worldwide pandemic was avoided. All right? So here it talks about how viruses cause disease. Unlike many other things that cause disease in humans, viruses are not alive, and we talked about that the previous day. Viruses are not made of cells. Through observations and experiments, scientists have learned that viruses can cause disease by taking over the life processes of their host cells. The host is the organism that the virus is infecting, such as a human. So here's how a virus infects its host. The virus enters the host organism through an opening, such as the nose, mouth, or cut in the skin. Once inside the body, it attaches to a host cell, and some or all of the virus enters the host cell. Then the virus will insert its own instructions into the host cell's instructions. So without knowing it, the cell starts making thousands of copies of the virus. These copies are released out of the cell, sometimes causing the cell to burst and die. The new viruses then repeat the cycle in other host cells. A person fighting a virus often looks sick. She or he may be feverish, coughing, or covered with a rash. These symptoms are the result of the body declaring war on the virus. The body raising its temperature can help to slow down a viral infection. Sneezing and coughing are the body's attempt to get rid of the virus. A rash may form where specialized blood cells that fight infection are called in to attack viruses. Curiously, it is often the body's overreaction to a viral infection that kills the host, not the virus itself. This was the case with the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Scientists think that when healthy people caught the virus, their bodies overreacted in an attempt to fight it. The severe response damaged their tissues and consequently led to death. All right, so this talks about the virus reproduction process, so we can get a visual of what we talked about yesterday and what we're discussing today. All right, so first is a picture of a cell, and this is a virus attacking the cell. Ooh, I see something that I want to take over. Let me insert myself. Mean old virus. Mean virus. Okay? The virus breaks into cell, gets in there, and then here you see the virus uses the cell's machinery to make copies of itself. So it goes in there, it becomes a copycat, makes copies of itself, and then new viruses break out of the cell, sometimes killing the cell. Okay? So this is how a virus takes over host cells. Okay? Fighting viruses. They say that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. This is especially true of viral infections, since many of the deadliest viruses are very hard to cure once they are inside body cells. Unlike bacteria, viruses can't be killed by antibiotics, which disrupt life processes because viruses aren't alive. Okay? So here's a picture of a young guy, clearly is not doing well, and it says antibiotics won't work on me. Who do you think this is? Yep, virus. Talking trash. Leave him alone. Stop being a meanie. Just wanted to hang out with his friends and have a good time, and then here you come. Mean old virus. Mean old virus. Okay? By studying data from past outbreaks, scientists have learned more about how to prevent the spread of viruses. Many of the things that were done in 1918 or even in 2014 were either not effective or were done too late. For example, scientists know now that the flu virus is spread through droplets sprayed into the air when an infected person coughs or sneezes. So covering a cough or a sneeze helps prevent the spread of the flu. Health officials didn't know this simple fact in 1918, and that is why the Spanish flu spread so easily at first. Ebola viruses spread through contact with an infected person's feces or body fluids. Healthcare workers have learned to handle patients' clothes and bedding with care to help contain the spread of viruses. Viral outbreaks most likely will always exist, but vaccines have been incredibly effective at reducing the outbreaks of many viruses across the world. Okay, so that is our reading for today. Please go into our comment section and just jot down what you learned from today's reading. Very informative, talking about the Spanish flu, we're talking about Ebola, or if you like, you can give a comment about the coronavirus. All right, but what have you learned about viruses, how they work, how they spread? All right, so we're going to close out with our outro. All right, I know you have it down pat at this point. I know you know the outro. I'm hitting the beat. All right, rap along with me. It's been fun. It's been real. We break it down and pick up science skills. Give yourself 2 claps just for tuning in. Come back, meet tomorrow. We can learn again. Oh, it's been fun. It's been real. We break it down and pick up science skills. Give yourself 2 claps just for tuning in. Come back, meet tomorrow. We can learn again. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you tomorrow.